Hello, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good. Okay. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I can imagine that, some of us, if not all of us, are pretty tired, which is okay. It's okay to be tired. Um, like Victor said, my name is Ashleigh Ann Gardner. I am a queer, autistic, ADHD theater practitioner, or you could just call me an artist. And before I get into this talk about trust and creative chaos today, I would really just like to say that creative chaos and thriving in creative chaos or thriving in general takes a lot of privilege, whether you are white or male or cis or if you are of a certain religion. So I think that we should just keep that in mind moving forward when we talk about success or when we talk about in general, just being successful in any sphere and how that influences us and the people around us. So the first thing that I want to start off, that's my intro card. I don't do public speaking very often. I prefer not to be the center of attention. I know that's kind of weird because I work in theater, but usually there is a script involved with theater. And because I am autistic, I have always relied on scripts when I am feeling successful. I really love having something that I can say that I know is going to be the same every time. And so this is not the same every time. This is the very first time I've given that talk. So I am a little nervous, you know. So my specialties are photography, playwriting, scenic and prop design, costume design and construction, performance, graphic design, and sound design. And I know that sounds like a lot, but that's why I call this talk Creative Chaos, because it is very chaotic. And part of that is because I have ADHD as well. Some of you might have ADHD, and some of you might also be on the autism spectrum. So you might understand how that feels sometimes. So photography, I've been photographing for almost my entire life. My parents got me a Coolpix Nikon camera when I was younger, and I just took photos of almost everything. I really loved playing around with framing, color, subjects. Playwriting I got into when I was in high school, and then I dropped it. And back in 2014, I started playwriting again for a show for Orlando Fringe, and then I decided that I really liked it because I went to school for English literature, and I really love literature and reading, but I also love theater, and I thought what better way to blend the two things than to put them together. And then scenic and prop design, I kind of fell into. I wasn't actually looking to do scenic and prop design. I just kind of did it because I thought, oh, this is an interesting thing to do. I find that I'm really good at it. And part of that is because my dad is a fabricator, which essentially means that he makes things. He makes various things. He used to work for a few model making companies, and then for a while he worked for Universal Creative. And sometimes when I was younger, when I was of working age, he would ask me, do you want to come to work with me and help for this week? And I would say yes. And so that's kind of how I got into the fabrication thing. And then I did some scenic design back in 2018, and the director of the theater was like, do you want to come on and do these other things? And so I said yes. And then costume design and construction, I recently, I guess 2020, I started sewing again after 12 years of not having sewn anything. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And I found that I really liked it. Sewing is always a challenge. Whenever you make a new garment, it's always a challenge because of the body type that you're sewing for, the techniques that you have to use in order to make that garment. And I really like design because it allows me to be really creative and make whatever I want, which is not commonly found in stores. If you walk into a store, you can't find the exact thing that you want. And if you do, it's very rare. And so to make your own clothing or to make clothing for someone else that looks really good on them or really good on you is a skill that I really like to have. And then performance, I've been performing since I was in middle school. I find it's a really good way to release a lot of anxiety because I have a lot of anxiety. And then graphic design and sound design, I also just kind of fell into because they were needed at the time. And somebody said, can you do this? And I said, yes. And those are that's something else that I really like doing. So when someone asks me, can you do this thing? And they need it because I am a people pleaser, recovering, I say yes. And then I usually end up getting good at it because I am also a perfectionist, unfortunately. So my special interests, I don't know if any of you can relate to these things, but I really love 18th to 20th century historical dress. I find it's incredibly fascinating. If you don't know anything about it, I would highly recommend going on YouTube, and the top people I recommend watching are Bernadette Banner, Abby Cox, and Nicole Rudolph. And they are some of the most interesting women in people who are doing this kind of research work, if you're interested in that. Historical corsetry, I have heard it said recently, if it's too tight, it's just not right. So I know that there's a lot of things currently with Bridgerton and how they make these women wear really tight corsets. It's not right. It shouldn't be worn that way. And then antique furniture. I believe that every piece of furniture that is an antique has a soul or an aura to it. And I really love being in antique shops. I also love cemeteries. And miniatures. I love miniatures. I think they're so cute. I have really bad cute aggression. So when I look at something and it's so cute, like this dog over in this office, so cute, I just want to cry. And then dialects of the British Isles. I pick them up really quickly because I'm really interested in the vowel sounds, the consonant sounds, and how different they are. And then the practical effects in fantasy and horror television and cinema. My dad showed me Army of Darkness when I was 10. And if you don't know what that is, it's part of the Evil Dead franchise. It's the third movie. And I was just fascinated with the skeletons, the army of skeletons. It was so incredible. So those are my specialties and my special interests. So I also have cognitive disabilities, like I mentioned. I'm on the autism spectrum. I have ADHD, combination hyperactive, and attention deficit, which kind of has like a war inside of my head all of the time. Sometimes I am both overstimulated and understimulated mentally, and I don't know what to do. And then I also have dyscalculia. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. So essentially, you have dyslexia, which is when you might have trouble reading words on a page because of various things that happen within the brain. Dyscalculia is kind of like that for math. It's a learning disability for math. When I was a kid, I said, "Mom, I think I have a learning disability because I'm really bad at math." And she said, "I don't think you have a learning disability." And that's not her fault because nobody talked about it when I was a kid. I'm almost 35, and back in the 90s, nobody talked openly about any of these things, partially because nobody really knew what synesthesia was. But also because nobody really talked about dyscalculia or autism or ADHD. So it's not her fault. But I do have dyscalculia. I also have synesthesia. I have 4 types. I'm not going to name all of them, but it's essentially when the synapses in your brain are cross-wired and you have these weird things that happen where you hear music and you see a color, or you hear music and you taste something. It's just the senses that you have are sort of mingling together and marrying to create this cool, sometimes really weird picture in your brain. And then I also have some CPTSD for some things that happened when I was a kid. I won't get into it, but all of these things influenced how I embrace creativity. And partially it's because I think it's a healing practice to embrace creativity and make things. And then also it allows me to explore things creatively because my ADHD is like, oh, I want to do this thing. And so I do that thing. And then my autism says, I really want to focus on this one thing for 4 hours without getting up from my chair. And I can do that. And I feel good doing it. And so I just follow that bliss. I think that's what you would call that. And I have these pictures up here because these are some really, really important people in my life who, they're all my family, who have influenced me creatively. So that's me as a baby, right there with my mom. My mom didn't realize that she was a really creative person until I was like 13. And I bought her a class to make bracelets at the local jewelry shop, and she went in and she made a bracelet, and she was like, I love this. And so now she's like a craft artist, and she's always done cross stitch, but she's a jewelry maker, and she crochets, and she does all these creative things. And then down here, this is me and my dad. He's the guy I mentioned who used to work for Universal Creative, and a model maker. And then up there is my dad. That's when I was like 3 or 4. And I'm sitting in the lap of my great-grandfather, and then above him is his daughter, my grandmother Judy. Judy's my dad's mom. And she was a teacher for 30 years, and she's also a painter. And my great-grandfather was a carpenter. He was a Freemason. And I remember going on walks with him around the neighborhood, and I would pick up rocks, and then I would bring them home, and he would mount them on these little wooden things. And he was just so creative, and he took scraps of wood and he made things for me. And so I was really influenced by all of this creativity that I saw around me, and I think that's why I turned into who I am today. And then that's me. I made that entire 18th century outfit, and I went to MegaCon this last year. But yeah, I was very proud of that. So this is my life map. I'm just going to go over it really, really shortly. I was born in 1989, and I was born in Missouri, which is not a super friendly state for creatives or people who are queer in general, except if you're in Kansas City. Apparently that's a pretty hoppin' place now, which is great. I went to high school and college in Orlando, Florida. I went to UCF. I got my bachelor's in English literature, and I also got my master's in literary, cultural, and textual studies with focuses on Victorian and Gothic literature, gender studies, and psychoanalytic theory. And then I went to work at an office job in 2015, and I found that it really didn't serve me, because I like to get up and I like to move around and I like to do things. And I also am a bit rebellious. So that really didn't work out for me very well. So I left to pursue a job as a full-time artist. And this entire time, I've been photographing, I've been doing like miscellaneous theater things. And then in 2020, COVID hit, and I needed a little bit of extra income. And during that time, embroidery became this huge thing because, the cottagecore aesthetic was in full bloom, and the internet was like, we're going to stay home. We're going to become pastoral. We're going to sit by our windows and watch the rain, and we're going to sew. And I was like, I'm going to cash in on that because that is also something I like to do. So I made my own embroidery pattern business, and then before that, actually, something really important happened. I wrote this play called Qualia, and Qualia has been a huge part of my life. It's essentially a story about a woman who is trapped alone in a bunker for 5 years, and she falls in love with her AI computer system who is sentient. And she tries to make him a body out of a medical pod that they have within the bunker. And a few things happen where a guy who she used to know finds the bunker, and then she has to decide whether to leave or to stay. And that premiered in 2019, and I wrote that before COVID started. And then COVID happened, and then in 2023, my one-person show happened. It's called The Knot. It's a horror play, essentially about PTSD and trauma, but it's supernatural horror. And then in 2024, just this year, Qualia has been contracted to show at 3 different regional theaters throughout the United States. So we just had one performance in January at Renaissance Theater Company in Orlando, and then in June in Chicago. And then next year, there's going to be a production in the Villages, and currently we're in talks to try to find funding to get it off Broadway in a couple of years. And then just last month, I photographed an off-Broadway production called From Here, which originated with Renaissance Theater Company. And it was an incredible experience. But that's sort of where I started and where I am now. So my photography, I always have professional missions with any of my creative endeavors, and then I also have personal missions. So my professional missions are performers should feel confident and beautiful. Always. As a performer myself, I always want to feel confident and beautiful. But people in general, I want everyone to feel confident and beautiful and seen. Designers should feel proud and that their work is showcased well. And then companies should feel certain that they can sell their show with eye-catching media. Because if you have a picture and you can't sell your show with it, it's not very good from a business standpoint. And so I want to give that to companies. And so these are a few of the images that I really, really love because they have a story involved. It's interesting what is happening in the story, but they also showcase people who are marginalized, which I'll get into in the next slide. But I really love showcasing emotion, and if there is an image that incites curiosity, I love that too, and also power. So in this picture right here, this picture is from the play Gaslight. Does anybody know what that movie is, what the play is? Okay, actually it's called Angel Street, but it's also known as Gaslight. But the term gaslight comes from that play, Angel Street, and it's about a man who convinces his wife that she's crazy so that he can either kill her or divorce her and take all of their money. And in this scene, it's the very last scene of the play, in the shot of the play, she's taking off her wedding ring after her husband gets arrested, and she and this investigator the female presenting investigator have found out that he's been lying to her. And then this picture down here is of my friend Indigo Lee, and she was in a recent production last year of Streetcar Named Desire where she played Blanche Dubois. And yeah, I think that's it for this slide. And so these are my personal missions for photography, to see the beauty in each moment. I think if you're just doing your job in general, or if I'm just at a gig and I'm just photographing, I don't have any fun with it. I don't feel anything. And for me to not feel something intrinsically is very scary. If you've ever been in a place where you just are shut off and shut down, it's a very scary place to be if you're dissociating. So I always try to find a thing in a shot or in a frame or in a moment to find the beauty or the joy in it. Feature marginalized performers. So if there is any person in the cast who may be marginalized in society, I try extra hard to make sure that I photograph them so that they feel like they are represented and that they feel appreciated, because I know that sometimes other people aren't going to do that. And I think that it's my responsibility to do that as a person who has that power. Love the person being photographed. I know that we don't know the people most of the time who, as photographers, we don't know them. We have no idea who they are. We don't know their names. We don't know where they're from. But I think in order to get a shot of a person who we want to feature in the best light, we have to love them. Even if we do know them and we don't particularly like them, it's our job to make them look good and give them a picture that makes them feel good about themselves. And then serve what is and what may be. So there's a really morbid thing that I think about sometimes when I photograph. And this is just part of my personality where I have really bad anxiety. But I always think about this when I'm photographing, that sometimes I see posts on Facebook where someone has passed away and their friends are posting pictures of them and in remembrance. And I think when I'm photographing, if this person dies, I want them to be able to have a good picture of them doing something that they loved, so that if they die, their friends and their family can have a picture of them saying, this is a person that I love that is doing something in this picture that they loved, and that represents this person for who they are and what they loved doing. And then find joy in capturing humanity. I saw this post the other day that was you can tell a lot about a person and what they miss by what they choose to photograph. And sometimes I just really want to be alone, but I would really miss humanity, and I would really miss having people around. People are the joy of my life. I have a text message chain with 3 of my best friends, and I don't know what I would do without them. So yeah, I photograph people primarily because I would miss having them around. Scenic design and set dressing. So, like I said, I kind of fell into this, but because I fell into it, I kind of went ham. And this was my first really, really big scenic design. It was an immersive theater experience called Nosferatu. Renaissance Theater Company opened in 2021, and we had this immersive theater experience that starred vampires, dancing vampires. And it was very sexy and very adult. But the director was like, I want a room that's kind of evocative of Twilight. And I said, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. Because he wanted a forest from the Pacific Northwest. I was like, I don't, with the tools and everything that we have, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. And so I took what we had available, which was a room that was painted white, and I said, I'm gonna make a white forest and a courtyard. So I did. And this is what it turned into. It was the space that was a castle courtyard that had white birch trees, spray painted white foliage, and it almost looked like it had been lightly snowing in the room. And so during this time, I was like, I want to create a professional mission for myself if I do scenic design. So part of that is transporting audiences to the world of a story. So the storyteller, the playwright, creates the world, and they give you a blueprint on what they want. And then it's your job to be like, okay, well, how can I make this environment what they want and supplement their vision? And then effectively supplementing the atmosphere, tone, and story that the play tells. So you want to extend that story and give audiences just a little bit more along the lines of the blueprint that you've been given. And then creatively use techniques and materials that are budget-friendly, safe, and durable. Durability, really important when you have an immersive theater experience because you have so many people on the set. Traditional theater, you don't have people from the audience on the set. Audiences like to touch things, which is okay in certain theater experiences. But if they're gonna touch things, they need to be durable. They also need to be safe. Safety is my number one priority when I am designing any space, when I'm set dressing any space, because I don't want myself, the actors, or the audience to get hurt because then they can't enjoy it. And they also have a bad time, and I don't want that to happen. And so to move on to my personal mission, create a space that reflects personal tastes in respect to the story. So I trust myself that I have good taste. And I know for a lot of us that like saying good things about yourself feels bad. Yeah, I see you laughing. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it feels really bad because we're taught that if we say good things about ourselves, it means that we're stuck up and we're self-centered, and that is not true. It's not true. If we say good things about ourselves, then we believe it, and then we believe that we are good at what we do and that we are good people. And so I think that that's something that needs to change in the artistic community. We are allowed to say that we are really good at something if we are really good at something. And if we're not really good at it, we can say, I'm trying to be good at that. That's because that's always admirable. And then dress sets and props and furniture that possess a particular aura. So like I said, I love antique furniture. And if I see a piece of furniture that has like an aura about it, it's just like a je ne sais quoi. I'm gonna be like, that one. And I have no explanation other than my brain going, that one. And that's intuition. And that's how I trust myself. And you use your intuition, especially when you're creative. Craft spaces that feel sacred. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with that castle courtyard was make it feel like a sacred space. You walk in and your breath is taken away because you feel like you can't speak because this is so beautiful, or it is a space that requires reverence. And then, or make a space feel familiar, but not. So kind of in this uncanny valley, like, you know, you've seen this place before, but you haven't ever been here. And it kind of takes your breath away in that moment. Provide areas where performers can play and store personal items. So as an actor, I love storing personal items on the set that I can play with later, or that I know are just there, and it adds to my personal story as a performer, but also for other performers if they need a drink of water. Like, we have to think about like personal needs. If a performer needs a drink of water, if they need a towel, if they need knee pads or something. And for play, so if there are dancers, you don't want to fill the room up with a bunch of furniture. You want to have a space where dancers can express their art freely without falling over things. So these are two pictures of sets that I set dressed over the past couple of years. So Nosferatu 2023 was at Renaissance, and this was the nursery. And we had dancers in there playing with these baby dolls, but we got all of these baby dolls and all of these toys from thrift stores, from other theaters around the area, and we just littered the nursery with them. And so when people would walk into the nursery, they would be kind of taken aback, because when you see a doll out of context and you aren't familiar with that doll, it's kind of like with the context that we've been given with horror movies, it becomes something that is safe but not safe. Familiar and unfamiliar, which is the uncanny valley. And this one down here is also kind of uncanny valley. The waiting room, and currently what is in the show 24 at Nosferatu. And this is the space that you were led into to wait to go into the speakeasy. And the scenic designer for the space was like, I want it to be kind of weird. And these are a list of things that I think they should have. And I was like, great, cool. We're gonna have everything super white. I'd covered books in white. I painted the desk, the tables white, everything. And then the only thing in color in the room is this poster that I designed with an eye in the middle of it. And it's right at the center in the wall. So if you want to look at something that's interesting, you have to look at this poster that upholds a false god that you're supposed to worship. And I really like this space because it is familiar, yet really unfamiliar at the same time, because we've all been in waiting rooms that look like this structurally, but we've never been in a waiting room that looks like this color-wise. And so it's just kind of weird to be in. And then this is my last slide for scenic design. This is the set that I designed, the painting that I designed for the 2020 version of From Here in February of 2020. It's a map of Orlando with a heart at the center. And if some of you are unfamiliar with what From Here is about, it's about a community of queer people who celebrate each other's community and each other. And it just happens that the Pulse event happens in the latter part of the show, and how that event affects their community and their love for one another. But this is the off-Broadway version of From Here that is currently playing in New York. And then my design made it to off-Broadway. So that's something that I'm really proud about. Thank you. My friend Joey Coombs, who's our scenic charge at the Wren, did the painting of the off-Broadway production. So costume design and construction, like I said, I kind of fell into this. I did a production of the Bacchae in September of 2020, and it was an outdoor show because none of us could be inside. We rehearsed outdoors, 8 feet apart, and we presented the show outdoors. And our director was like, I want the costumes to look like this. And I said, I don't have anything like that. I also was really self-conscious about my arms at the time. So I was like, I want something with sleeves. I don't know if I can find anything with like what I want. So I think I'm gonna try to make it. And I did. I had a sketch, and this was the first time that I'd sewn in 12 years. And I was like, I really hope that I can remember how to do this, because it's really scary, because what if I mess up? I don't want to have to spend the money on other fabric. So I designed this dress. It's made out of 3 different McCall's and Simplicity patterns. If you're familiar with McCall's and Simplicity, if you're a sewist. If you're not, they're part of the Big 5 now, the Big 5 pattern companies, commercial patterns. So my professional mission when I do costume design and construction is design clothing that represents the tone of both the play and the personality of the character. So if you're doing a show that's Macbeth, and I can say that here because it's not a theater. If you do a show that is Macbeth and you're putting your characters in like commedia dell'arte clothing and it doesn't fit the tone of that particular production, it doesn't make any sense, and the audience is going to be really confused. So you want to match the personality and the tone of the play to that of the character. And also, if the character is a really kind of down person, like if they're sad, if they're kind of slow moving, if they talk about certain things, it would be counterintuitive to put them in really, really bright colors unless it was for a very specific reason in the text. Create a garment that accounts for ease of wear, comfort, mobility, and any sensory challenges. So as a neurodivergent person who has sensory difficulties with elastic, I hate elastic. I've said on several occasions to people who are costuming me, I cannot do elastic. Please don't, unless it is like a very broad piece of elastic. And so I always want to account for other people's sensitivities and sensory challenges, because I know that that's a concern for myself. And I always want somebody to be comfortable, because when you are comfortable, you feel confident, and you are better able to do your job as a performer if you are comfortable and confident and you know that you can move well. And then choose materials that are both durable and either inexpensive or easy to replace or to repair. So if you get something that is really bespoke and hand sewn from somewhere, it is so important that you know how to repair that. Because if it rips or it shreds or it breaks, there is no replacing it. And if you do have to replace it, and if you can replace it, it's going to be expensive. And which is an extremely important thing to think about when you're talking about theater, because as we all know, the arts are underfunded. And I know from experience that the theater is severely underfunded. So my personal mission for costume design and construction is to make a costume that is complementary of the performer's body shape and individual confidences and insecurities. I've worked with a performer a few times now who is very confident about their lower body, but is not confident about their upper body. And I am the same way. And I would not want somebody to put me in something that I was uncomfortable wearing. And so I always consult with the performer. What do you like? What do you want shown off? What are you insecure about? Let's handle that in a very respectful way. Pull from historical sources and text to create a garment that is imbued with meaning. So for example, this is me in the production of Nosferatu last year. I was a Scottish vampire witch called the Bervenshee. And when we were doing costume design and concept, our costume director was like, I think she needs to be more sexy. And I didn't know what that meant because I don't really do that. That's not something I'm really familiar with, because I like pink, and I'm not very, I would say that's not really my style. And so I had no idea what she meant, but she was like, how about more like this shape? And I was like, okay, I can try it. So this is what I sketched out. And these symbols here are taken off of stones that are in Pictish, that are ancient Scottish, and I've forgotten the word now, I should have studied before my presentation. They're taken off of ancient stones from Scotland, and they are before Christianity had been, they're before Christianity had been introduced to Scotland. And I really wanted to make her character ancient, old, esoteric, otherworldly, and unfamiliar to our audience. So that's where I pulled from. And then she also has this crown of antlers, because in the mythology of the Bervenshee, these witches, these vampire witches, have deer hooves instead of feet. They wear these long green gowns, and then when they lift them up, the way that you know that they're not human is because they have deer feet and deer hooves. And so I wanted to incorporate that into her costume design. And on the pair of stays, which I handmade as well, there are antlers on the stays to call back to the crown. And one of my other personal missions is to design and stitch with care. So whenever I make something that somebody's going to wear, I like to think of the performer wearing the item and what may help them or what may harm them. So I need to add elastic. How is this elastic going to work with the movement of their body? I need to add a snap or anything like a closure. Is this going to be easy for them to take off? Is it going to be too easy for it to come off? Or do I need something a bit more strong? And I can't make something too tight or it's going to hurt them. And then finally, be thoughtful with words and descriptions when talking to performers, also when talking to yourself. if you say something that is insensitive, that comment can stick with that person for years. I've been victim to that, and it's not fun, and it makes that person feel underappreciated and terrible about themselves. And I think it's really important that we're conscious about what we say to each other and to ourselves, because inevitably what we say to ourselves, we say to other people. This is just a little showcase of a current costume that is being used at 24 at the Run. This is my friend, Lo Kohi, and I was in a production with them a couple of years ago in the Villages, and they've become one of my absolute favorite performers. They are the MC of the show. And this design down here is by Romain de Tertroff, who is also known as the designer Erte, designed fashion, just gorgeous, gorgeous fashion pieces in the 1920s. And I saw this image that he designed, and it was for a costume for the 1922 Greenwich Follies. And it ended up being a costume piece. There's a photo of it, fully made. And I saw it and I was like, this is amazing, because I love it because it's, so at the Ren, we're kind of, we like to showcase sexy things. We like to showcase subversive things. And what I really liked about this was that you have a woman who is being served by two men, and she has them in cages underneath her peignets, or panniers, depending on how you like to pronounce them. And peignets, or panniers, are a piece of 18th century, what I would call underwear, that allow the skirts to be supported out to the side. So Marie Antoinette, that really wide shape, the cages underneath are called peignets or panniers, and that's what allows the skirt to be held up. But this is a stripped down version of it, and it's also just a little bit different because you have these like loop-de-loops here with tassels. And I was like, I love that. I know we have a pair of peignets in the costume shop, and I want to work with that. But I also wanted something that was like a little androgynous too, because we also like to play with gender at the Ren. So I got the jacket and this bodysuit, and then also these pants. And you can tell that some of the elements here and here are not the same. And sometimes that happens either because of cost, time, or energy. And that's okay. That's okay if some things are different from your initial sketch. And then over here, is Lo wearing those peignets, and the sketch over here has little loop-de-looped pearls instead of the little dangly bits that are on the sketch. But this is something that is probably one of my favorite designs to date. So playwriting is my last topic. Like I said, I came into playwriting when I was in high school, and I really liked it. And then I didn't get back into it because I was in college and I was doing a lot of reading and writing, and it really burned me out. And when I was in grad school, somebody asked me to write something, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I can do that. I can do that. So I started writing short plays first, just 10-minute plays. And then it turned into one act, and then it turned into full lengths. And my first two one acts that were produced were, this one's called Ghost, and this one's called Funeral Party, and they were produced in tandem. So you had a one act, an intermission, and then a one act. And those are very contemporary pieces. I would say they're like living room dramas. They didn't take place, well, one of them took place in a living room. The other one took place in a crematorium. But these other ones, they're a little more spicy, not in terms of like sexual theme, but like in terms of genre. So The Knot, I mentioned before, is a supernatural horror piece about trauma and PTSD. It's about a person, a non-binary person who lives in Missouri, and they've experienced a visitation by an entity for their entire lives at different times. And every time this entity shows up, it looks different, but they know intrinsically that it is this thing. And it finds them, it follows them, it tries to attack them, and at the end, it comes to them at the house where they're at, and it's outside, and they decide enough is enough, I'm gonna get rid of this thing, and they leave to go kill it. And that's the last scene of the play. And then Ulshin, or The Gathering, is a revenge play about a few people who get together and they trick someone into coming to dinner with them, and then they drug them, and then it's essentially a play about getting revenge on someone who has harmed the community and who has not paid for their misdeeds, and what that might look like, and is it wrong to do this? Is it okay to do this? And it asks questions like that, but it gives no answer. And then the last one is Qualia, that is currently in talks to get produced elsewhere. But my professional mission for playwriting is to tell stories that appeal to modern audiences. So we have so many plays that are written by people who are gone from this earth. They are old, they have old themes. They use language that is outdated and unacceptable. And I'm specifically talking about plays that have harmful language that is racist, sexist, ageist, that makes fun of disability, things like that. And while some of these plays, not the plays I talked about, but while some plays that are by dead authors are meaningful and great, there are others that are overproduced. And while those are good for some businesses and some theaters, I think that we really need to start looking at the possibilities that new voices and new plays and new stories present to us. It's not just about like the fear of producing this new unknown play. It's about the possibilities that come when producing these new unknown plays, and the good things that could come from them. And so I think that theaters should trust their communities and their community of playwrights to write plays that are exciting and new and creative. And then to write plays that are producible. One of the things that I took away from an SCTC conference, which is like a theater conference, was I attended a workshop that was about writing producible plays. And she said it needs to be inexpensive, easy to cast, and easy to market. Whether that's like through a really simple log line or just something that's really interesting that people are going to want to come see. And so when I write a play, I always think about the technicians first. That's something that a lot of performers forget about, is they forget about the technicians and the designers that are involved in creating these plays from the ground up. And I always think about, like, what is the set going to look like? Is it a feast for the eyes that is something that a scenic designer is going to have a really good time with? Or is it going to be really simplistic and they're not going to have to worry and burn themselves out over it? Qualia is a play that is really good for sound designers because it has a lot of like just really, really tiny sound bites that need to be designed because we haven't really heard these kinds of sounds before. And so I always like to keep that in mind when I write. And then the last thing is create characters that are exciting for actors to portray. So no actor wants to play a boring character. They want something that they're proud to put on their resume and that also like feeds their creativity inside of them, because an actor just isn't like a flesh and bone person that you see. An actor is their soul too. And I think that that's how most actors, most really good and effective and passionate actors are fed, is through their soul. So my personal mission with playwriting is to ask questions instead of providing answers. So with every play, I just want to ask a question. I don't want to give you what the answer is because I don't want to tell you what to do. I think that choice should be made for you to make. Showcase the human condition. So I think it's really easy to write about events or to write about acts. But I think it's more interesting to ask about what is the human condition in all of this? What do people do? What do people not want to do? And then address universal problems, whether subtly or directly. So Qualia deals with isolation, with men telling women that they can't do something or that they shouldn't do something. It deals with fear. It deals with PTSD. It deals with a lot of these different things in different ways, and it touches on them lightly. And then create characters that are neither 100% hero or villain, because none of us, for the most part, are 100% hero or villain. We all make choices that are great, and we all make choices that are not so great. But I think that that's what makes us human beings. And the fact that we're able to move on after those things, I think says a lot about who we are as humans. And then with right characters who are intelligent and or capable of change and growth. So I'm including the Chicago production of Qualia here. Alex is played by Shelby Marie Edwards, and she plays Alex here. She's a scientist. She's also a nurse before the apocalypse happens. But she becomes a scientist because she needs to become one out of necessity. And then over here is my friend Monica Mulder in the production of Ghost. She's very intelligent and very talented, but she's not as emotionally, the character of Petra is not emotionally very mature, but she finds that towards the end of the play. And then down here is the production of Funeral Party, and that's me and actor named Jonathan Kress. And my character Gwen in this show is very closed off and doesn't want to admit a lot of things. But by the end of the play, she makes an apology and a gesture of apology as well that changes. She has this character arc that gets her over something. She's also very intelligent. She's a master's degree and she's a librarian. And then this character is from The Knot. This is me again. Their name is Sasha, and they're not college educated. They dropped out of high school. They're not intelligent in terms of schooling, but they are intelligent in terms of the community that they're involved in. They know where everything is in their community. They have a photographic memory of street names and maps. So there are different kinds of intelligence. And the fact that this character goes from being absolutely terrified of this thing that they're talking about, and at the end, they want to go out and they want to get it instead. So that's what I mean about writing characters who are capable of growth and change. So this is my last slide. To embrace creative chaos, I think it's really, really important to have most of these things. Sometimes you don't have them because, again, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, some of us have more privilege than others. And I think that it's a really, really important thing to think about when we think about ourselves and other people. Curiosity, trust, privilege, rebellion. You have to be a little bit rebellious. Sometimes somebody tells you you shouldn't or you can't do something because, I don't know, it's too expensive, or because you're a girl and you can't do it, or because, well, I mean, somebody, I heard somebody say that, like, autistic people shouldn't do these things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I did these things. A bunch of other people did these things. Of course you can do these things. Perseverance, flexibility, passion, and love. And I know that sounds like ooey gooey and really sappy, but I think love for yourself and love for the people you are creating for and love for your community allows, like, it's like a string that's hooked up to your rib cage and it just pulls you through. So if you ever have a really hard time finishing something, if you have a really, really hard time pushing yourself through a project, don't think of it as being pushed. Think of it as being pulled from the ribcage. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Hi. Hi. You said you were from Missouri. I actually have friends down there. Where, like, in Missouri are you from?
So, I am from, well, I was born in Columbia, and which is like the north-ish. And then, I mean, it is north from where I kind of grew up. I moved here when I was 4 with my family, but then like every summer I went back to spend the summers with my grandparents who lived in Sikeston, which is in southeast Missouri. Yeah, and my cousin currently lives in St. Louis. So yeah, very familiar with Missouri. It is a lovely state. It's a beautiful state. There's so many cornfields down south. And there are just, I went to this place called Herman, Missouri that has a winery and they have the best antique stores. So Herman, Missouri is great. But yeah, I love Missouri. I love it. Yeah, I love the state. Hi.
My question Which of these elements of creative chaos help you the most get past creative blocks?
Oh my gosh. I would say the more intuitive ones.
Yeah.
Because perseverance, well, I look at perseverance and I'm like, well, my brain tells me to persevere, but why? And my brain goes, but why? Why would you want to persevere? And I look at rebellion, and sometimes I don't have the energy to rebel. I'm just so tired all the time. Passion, I'm just so tired all the time. Curiosity, I'm just so tired all the time. But I think, like, it's really on the nose, but it's trust. I'm in revisions for a play that I wrote years ago, probably like 10 years ago now, called Eleftheria. And it's a play that is, it's a new mythology, and it's about shame and how women are shamed because of various things that they do in their lives. And the basic plot is that a young woman is sent into an underworld for outcast and shamed female spirits, and there's like a religious ceremony that takes place in this underworld that is about shame. And over the course of the play, the cycle breaks through 3 of these separate women who exist down there banding together and trying to break this shame cycle. But it also has language, like a new language in it, and has a dictionary and everything. And when I think about revising it, I'm like, God, this is such a beast. I don't want to deal with this. And then I remember that, and I'm going to say good things about myself, Qualia was so well received, and it is so good, and I've revised it to death. And I mean, I think sometimes it can still use like just a couple of like edits, but it was so well received, and so many people want to see it off Broadway in the Orlando community that I have to trust myself and say, you do good work, you have good instincts. You wrote this show 10 years ago, and it was interesting, and now it's time to make it good. And I think that trusting myself has been so difficult because my entire life I've been told not to trust myself. I've been told not to trust my intuition. If something made me uncomfortable when I was a kid, I was told to push through it. I was told to just accept it, that that's the way things are. And I'm done with that. And I've started trusting myself, and I found that I'm happier just as a person. I'm happier as an artist, especially like after leaving my desk job, which I hated. I found that I was so much happier. And when I leaned into myself, I kind of leaned into the embrace of myself. And now I feel great. So trust, yeah.
That's a great answer.
Thanks. Thank you for your question. Hi.
I saw each time the project has personal or professional or both vision. I wonder, do you start with one or the other first, or does everyone have both? Projects have both? And how do you come to that?
Oh, wow. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg, isn't it? I think I can't really say that one comes before the other. It's kind of like a big old casserole or soup, if you prefer. Things are thrown in as you like, and there is no rule. There are no rules. There are just suggestions. Sometimes there are rules, and some rules are good. But the creative process for me is just suggestion. I even think with writing music, when I write music, I don't ever start with the lyrics first. I don't ever start with the music first. It's just all sort of like, what do I feel like today? And that's also just following intuition too. It's like whatever you feel like doing. Yeah, thank you.